Greetings to everybody, participants and resource persons in this very important Metropolis Conference being held in Canada. Thank you for giving me the privilege to send you my presentation, despite the fact that I am not able to be with you in person. This is a time that I report annually to the UN Human Rights Council session in Geneva. Nevertheless, it is a privilege for me to be here with you to discuss and reflect on this important topic of internally displaced persons, or IDPs, and be part of this esteemed panel. It is very important to take note that along with refugees and migrants, IDPs are also people on the move. And for many situations, usually migrants and refugees start being internally displaced. Nevertheless, it is very clear to us as well that the guiding principles on internal displacement provide us a very clear descriptive definition on who are IDPs. These are persons or groups of persons who have been forced or obliged to flee or to leave their homes or places of habitual residence, in particular as a result of or in order to avoid many causes, one or many causes. For example, armed conflict, situations of generalized violence, including crime, gang violence, violations of human rights, and natural or human-made disasters, and which we now call natural hazards. But it is also important to recognize that unlike refugees and migrants, they have not crossed an internationally recognized border. Being internally displaced does not confer a specific legal status contrary to refugees. However, IDPs should enjoy the same rights as any other person in the country under whose jurisdiction they happen to be. And if they are citizens of that country, they must enjoy the same rights as well. What makes them different is that because of the displacement, they suffer from heightened risks to their protection and security. As of the end in 2018, the latest figures say that more than 40 million people remain displaced by conflict, internally displaced by conflict, human rights violations, and generalized violence worldwide. Most conflict displacement took place in sub-Saharan Africa and the Middle East. Countless more were displaced due to disasters, and disaster displacement is prevalent in East Asia and the Pacific, South Asia, and Americas, regions with high disaster risk because of high levels of exposure and vulnerability. And in 2018, until now, we are also witnessing increasingly the situation in sub-Saharan Africa. Unknown number of people are also being displaced by development projects, land grabbing, and human rights violations. Just the numbers alone are staggering, and they remain under the radar, so to speak. Majority of those recorded displaced by armed conflict and violence, moreover, remain in protracted displacement, that is, with no durable solutions in sight, for an average of about 20 years. Why is it important to pay attention to internally displaced persons? The purpose of highlighting the situation of IDPs and working to enhance their protection is not to privilege IDPs over other groups. IDPs have the same rights as others in their country, as I have said. They often experience many of the same risks as other civilians caught in conflict who are also in need of protection. Yet, the experience of internal displacement also creates heightened as well as distinct protection risks. These particular risks need to be understood and addressed so that the rights of IDPs are protected along with those of other civilians. 2018, last year, marks the 20th anniversary of the guiding principles on internal displacement, a result of the collaborative approach from the time of my first predecessor, Professor Francis Deng. And this year, from last year onwards until 2020, are actually very good years to take time, to take stock as we look back over those 20 years of action. And we must renew and increase our concerted efforts and commitment. The number of IDPs since the start of the guiding principles have more than doubled. Last year, 2018, marks the 20th anniversary of the Guiding Principles on Internal Displacement, which is a framework, a law framework, which is a result of the collaborative approach from the time of one of my predecessors, Professor Francis Deng. And 2018 until 2020 and onwards are actually good years to take stock as we look back on those 20 years of action to protect the human rights of IDPs and to renew and increase our concerted efforts. At the end of last year, of 2017, the General Assembly actually called on states, UN agencies, entities, and myself as the Special Rapporteur on the Human Rights of IDPs, regional organizations, national human rights institutions, NGOs, and other stakeholders to mark the 20th anniversary of the Guiding Principles and use this opportunity to look at our achievements and acknowledge the growing challenges. It's also an opportunity to step up our efforts to prevent and respond to and facilitate solutions to internal displacement and galvanize others to do the same. Last year, during the 20th anniversary, my annual report to the Human Rights Council emphasized that while much has been achieved, many challenges nevertheless remain unaddressed. While we take encouragement with these many successes, we need to learn lessons on how to do better. The Guiding Principles remain an essential and only so far comprehensive framework for the human rights-based approach to internal displacement, which is needed to shift to the discourse of national sovereignty to effective responsibility on human rights obligations. What is the Guiding Principles 20 Plan of Action, which we actually launched last year, and which is from 2018 to 2020. The 20th anniversary, as I said, offers us an opportunity to step up our efforts. And the Guiding Principles so far, as the only framework for response, is really important. It's an internationally recognized framework on IDPs conferred by the UN General Assembly and the UN Commission on Human Rights, and restate the rights of internally displaced persons as enshrined in international human rights law and international humanitarian law. Although the Guiding Principles on Internal Displacement as a whole is considered soft law and therefore not binding as a collective set of principles, however, the principles are based on international human rights and IHL norms that over the years have become binding on states based on use cogents, the respective ratification of international instruments by the states, and emerging and developing customary international law. This is especially true for monostates. It is important to recognize this as this is the basis for further development of domestication of international law through legislation and policy, and emerging jurisprudence not only from national courts but also international courts are attesting to this importance of the Guiding Principles on Internal Displacement. The Guiding Principles emphasize that sovereignty entails responsibility. Moreover, it emphasizes the participation of IDPs in decisions that affect them, and that the Guiding Principles apply in all displacement situations, due to all causes and covering all aspects, including adequate response from prevention of arbitrary displacement through to durable solutions. It has been an essential instrument for states and organizations advocating for the rights of IDPs. Moreover, the Guiding Principles are a basis for some 30 national laws and policies on IDPs worldwide. The Guiding Principles have been widely translated and used for trainings to foster the common understanding and action on IDPs. I use the Guiding Principles in my dialogue with states, grappling with situations on internal displacement and to help them fulfill their rights as IDPs. And I have had fruitful exchanges with the national and local governments in my official visits, leading to profiling exercises on IDPs and increased focus on the part of governments on the issue. I encourage you to use the Guiding Principles as a tool in your advocacy with the national governments, with NGOs, with IDPs themselves, with local authorities to ensure that a comprehensive response is in place. The Guiding Principles has therefore been the framework for what we have called the Plan of Action from 2018 to 2020, or the GP20. A series of events have been started to being organized for this 20th anniversary. The result is this 3-year plan of action for advancing prevention, protection, and solutions for IDPs. And we launched this plan of action in Geneva in April last year. It identifies 4 very important priorities. The first is facilitating IDP participation. And for this, we have the objective of strengthening the participation of IDPs in decisions that affect them, including IDPs themselves who may be particularly vulnerable or marginalized. The second is IDP laws and policies. And we aim to expand the further development and implementation of national laws and policies on internal displacement, including enabling governance frameworks in governments, particularly, for example, in having focal points in governments. But it is important that NGOs and advocates focus as well on the emergence of laws and policies that affect IDP protection. This is one of the ways that we can make sure that IDPs are always in the radar of the states themselves. The latest of this was Niger, which I visited last year, and this year they passed their very first domestication of the Kampala Convention on IDPs, which is a restatement of guiding principles for Africa. Number 3, we need to increase the capacity, the number of states with the capacity to collect and analyze and use quality data on internal displacement for designing an effective response to internal displacement. And for this reason, we are working with the UN Statistical Commission as well as other NGOs in enabling many national commissions to set up their systems in collecting IDP and refugee statistics together. And fourth, of course, is the perennial problem, protracted internal displacement, which, as we have said, is an important issue altogether, because the average protracted displacement situation is around 20 years altogether, leaving us with lost generations worldwide of children growing up in internal displacement situations. We need to address protracted displacement and scale up engagement on solutions for IDPs. We have to use the Interagency Standing Committee framework on durable solutions for internally displaced persons. And as well, we have to take advantage of the goals on the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals, which affect internally displaced persons, in order to ensure that no one is left behind. My sincere hope is a GP20 plan of action in all these priorities: IDP participation, IDP law, IDP data, and IDP solutions will help us collaborate and work strategically to make a difference for the IDPs themselves. Concrete results for the protection of IDPs matter to the society. I am confident that the GP20 plan of action will give us space to put our energy together to make a difference. The guiding principles on internal displacement are here to help us, states, NGOs, academics, to own our own responsibilities, various responsibilities to IDPs, seriously in accordance with the basic tenets of sovereignty, yes, but also in terms of solidarity. Thank you very much, and I wish you fruitful discussions in the conference.